We are talking trade deadline and more with Karo Blikian of the Hockey News on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Joining us today for a special interview is friend of the show, Karo Blikian, who covers the LA Kings for the Hockey News. He's also one of the hosts of the Bannerman Podcast. You can follow him on X and Twitter at KGBLix, LIX. And we welcome him in right now. Hey, Karo, how you doing? Thanks for joining us.
Eddie, my friend, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm actually still pretty giddy over that third period comeback against Vegas. And I was pretty lucky. I was there as a fan. A couple of followers of this show got me right behind the net where the Kings scored all four of their goals in that third period. So that was pretty fun.
Better view than the press box, huh?
It was a little bit better. Yeah, a little bit better. But I'm not complaining. I appreciate my press box privileges.
Sure.
But for that win in particular, did that win prove anything to you? Did it encourage you at all about this team in any way?
It's hard not to be encouraged. I think the most encouraging part is that they're scoring 4 or more goals almost every game now in the month of February. I believe every game. So that's encouraging because before that, like they went through a stretch where they just couldn't score to end off January. And I'm encouraged by that. I've been encouraged really all this month because you could see there's a different mentality when it comes to the attack. I feel like they're on the rush a lot more. I think their power play has been a little bit better, nothing crazy, but I just feel like their forecheck and their rush specifically has been different than it was certainly in January, and especially down that stretch where they couldn't even buy a goal.
Clearly, the Kings look like a pretty special team on home ice. Does that change anything as far as the way you feel about this team getting some playoff success this season?
If they have home ice advantage in the playoffs, I guess, then yes, because they're outstanding at home. And I don't know if there's a rhyme or reason to the disparity in their record between home and away. I certainly don't have a theory at this point, but it's working and I'm not going to question it. So it makes their trek up the Pacific Division standings that much more important. Regardless of who they're going to face in the first round, I think to be in that 1 or 2 spot, and all of a sudden the 1 spot is within reach, to be in the 1 or 2 spot, I think it would do them well, especially considering how well they're playing at crypto right now.
Yeah, you talk about rhyme or reason with the home record, and it kind of kicked in my head here. A little light bulb went off. Is there any rhyme or reason why they are so good in the third period and seemingly not so great in the second period? Is the long bench, is that any explanation?
Maybe. I think maybe the 11-7 is, I think, maybe suited for the third period where you could roll maybe the 2 lines that you see are doing well that game. We saw that last game, right? Like, surprisingly, probably for the first time this season, the Kopitar line or whatever iteration of the Kopitar line that was not one of the lines that Jim Hiller kept throwing or rolling. It was really heavy on the Danault line and then went with the Byfield line almost back-to-back for like 4 or 5 straight shifts. It was just that line going out. So maybe that's it, right? The benefit of the 11-7 is you could shorten the bench and really throw out the guys you want. Although I suppose you could do that anyway, even with a 12-6 formation. But I think with Jim Hiller specifically, it's like he has no problem when the game's on the line to really shorten the bench. That's all I got, man. There's a lot of just mystery still with this team, but they've been so good defensively, and now they have 2 pairs that are both shut down and could generate some offense a little bit. I think the key to them having such good third periods might be how well they defend when it's crunch time. So it's all this recipe that's working right now for this team.
Well, that leads me into my next question. Drew Doughty has returned, looking pretty good. I thought he got a lot of good play and good benefits from the Four Nations. We had discussed earlier when we knew he was coming back at some point, what was going to happen because of the way Vladislav Gavrikov has played so well on the top pairing. And initially, they put Drew right back in his old spot. But now they've gone back to Mikey and Vlad at the top pairing, and now Drew Doughty and Joel Edmondson on the second pairing. You've kind of tipped your hand, I think, a little bit. But what do you think about the top four defensively?
Yeah, I mean, the Anderson-Gavrikov pair, certainly no surprise that they just picked up where they left off before the break. Not surprised by that. A little surprised that it's not immediately back to Doughty Anderson and it's Doughty Edmondson. I don't know if the team or the fan base planned on that or necessarily finds that ideal. I think Joel Edmondson, despite his contract, is an ideal third pairing defenseman, but he has shown that he can eat minutes up to 20 minutes. The results are fine, maybe mixed if you want to be critical. It works now. I'm concerned if that alignment works in a 7-game series when you're matched up against, I'm going to say it, McDavid and Draisaitl, respectively. Like one pair is probably going to handle one, the other pair is going to handle the other. And if you're going to just roll those guys for 20 plus minutes each, I am concerned if that's a long series, games 5, 6, 7, how a Joel Edmondson would hold up against that kind of attack and those kinds of minutes. So remains to be seen. But for now, it's working. And who am I to judge?
Well, Brandt Clarke has been sort of the odd man out, if you want to call it that, with this 7 defenseman setup. Are you okay with that?
No, I just said, who am I to judge? So I'm about to judge, I guess. No, I mean, I'm a fan of Brandt Clarke, first and foremost, the player. Like, just get that out of the way. And my thing is this, like, yes, sometimes you look at the situation and you're like, okay, what is Jim Hiller supposed to do with this situation? And I understand that part of it. But at the same time, like the idea of letting Matt Roy walk in the summer was like, well, Clark and Spence need their minutes. These guys need to play. And I was like, yes, I agree with that. These guys need to play. Brandt Clarke started off obviously tremendously this season. A lot of that is because of Drew Doughty not being in the lineup, so he got those minutes. I guess my question is, what has Brandt Clarke done or not done since then to warrant his ice time being peeled back so significantly? So yes, sometimes it's just the circumstances, right? Like, that's what it is. But at the same time, like, I think he needs to be in the lineup. And the way the Kings power play has struggled all season, it's like you need players like Brandt Clarke, whether it's on power play 2, whatever, to be in the lineup. So I am not thrilled with that, certainly. But I am reserving harsh judgment until the trade deadline, because I feel like something has to give somewhere there. And I don't know if that's Jordan Spence. I don't know if that's Brandt Clarke himself. Like, I really don't know. But at the same time, I just feel like we're way past the point of sheltering those two specifically. They're ready to play. Spence has proven it over a couple of seasons. I think Brandt Clarke has proven it this season, where he went on a stretch where he was playing 20 plus minutes a game every night. And you could correct me if I'm wrong, I do not recall him making egregious errors or bad enough reads where you're like, okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that 20, but now we're going down to 5 and 8 minutes a night. Like, that's a big drop off. So I'm concerned about that. Yes, Eddie, I am. I don't like it.
Well, it seems the defense is a strength. Goaltending looks solid. But of course, offense of late, we've seen it look a lot better, but I think it's still probably a little bit of a concern. Quentin Byfield hasn't been scoring goals, but he's certainly been setting up teammates. Kevin Fiala has been on fire. We saw Trevor Moore with a 2-goal game. We'll see if that, puts some life into him a bit. But do you feel like there is some optimism about the Kings players who haven't been producing all season getting going at the right time?
Yeah, I think so. I think I think you and I last time I was on, like we just talked about Byfield not producing and Fiala was struggling, and I kind of said like it doesn't really matter right now. It matters when the time comes, and hopefully this is the time. It looks like it's the time for Fiala. He is scorching in February, and it's not just the goals and the numbers. He's dangerous every time he's over the boards. Like it's unmistakable. Like he's on the ice and he has the puck. He's not making those risky plays that maybe he was criticized for. He's not really taking penalties anymore. It seems like he's doing all the right things away from the puck, and then when he gets the puck, he's letting his skill just completely take over. And that's like Kevin Fiala at his best, and that's what we're seeing in the month of February. Byfield, I think the numbers haven't been there, but I haven't really been concerned. Is there room for criticism and growth? Yes, absolutely. But he's making plays, like he's driving play. He's the line he's on. And whether it's, last game we saw Fiala Kempe with him, Fiala LaFerriere, like the numbers, the underlying numbers, he's driving play in the right direction consistently. And when you're doing that, like everything else is going to fall in place one way or another. So I like those two together. I really liked Adrian Kempe with them, but obviously if you do that, that presents a whole slew of other issues with your, face of the franchise centerman currently anyway, in Andre Kopitar being kind of left to his own devices. So we'll see. I'm optimistic, but I still think there's, you want to call it holes, there's still holes to fill in this offense for me to be comfortable. And we'll see what happens in like 10 days or so here.
Yes, that leads us right into what we're going to talk about next. Just getting started here with Karo Blikian, 9 days away from the trade deadline as we are recording this. We'll talk about that and more on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. You just realized your business needs to hire someone yesterday. How do you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. If you've been in that spot where you need the right hire, the pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback, that's exactly when Indeed's sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. And now, you can speed up the hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. All right, we are continuing with Karo Blikian of the Hockey News, covering the Los Angeles Kings. And as I mentioned, the trade deadline next Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. For the most part, it's a fun time to speculate and debate. Before we get into some names, is it clear to you, Karo, that the big need for the Kings is a forward, a right shot, preferably to help out offensively and on the power play? Or do you think there's some other area that they might need to address?
Yeah, I think the number one need is you pretty much nailed it. They're a right shot, someone who can produce on the power play, someone who could play on Kopitar's wing. I think that's important. Like there's been a stretch of games here recently where they've run the 11-7, but the rotating forward's been on the top line, which is, I don't know if you want that. I don't think that's an ideal scenario, right? It's your top line. They're going to get a bulk of the minutes. You want some sort of chemistry to be settled there before the playoffs to know, like, this is my top line. You want to argue Byfield's line's the top line, perfectly fine. But it's still, Andre Kopitar on the ice. You need a set group with him, I believe. So that's the first one that comes to mind, of course. I flirt with the idea of a left shot defenseman to pair with Drew Doughty, only because it seemed like the Kings were so into the Edmondson-Clark pairing in the summer and the beginning of the season. So I do wonder about that, but that opens up a whole other layered conversation of, like, do you trade Jordan Spence to make that happen? If you trade Spence, are you comfortable with that, knowing Gavrikov isn't signed yet? So in a world where you lose Gavrikov and Spence at the same time or in the same summer, that's almost catastrophic. You don't want that, right? So I flirt with the idea. I don't date the idea. That's why I don't do that. But yeah, right shot. I mean, yeah, I think that's got to be what they're targeting at this point. And I think you need that because the three lines rolling against a team like, we're going to go back to Edmonton, but against a team like Edmonton, that gives you a chance. Because if you go 2 lines versus 2 lines, I don't think it's going to end very well for you, any team against the Oilers. So, yes, I would say have your top 3 lines set, however you want to do it, but clearly the need is a winger, a right shot winger for Andre Kopitar for the power play.
You wrote an article today about one rumor in particular about Quinton Byfield possibly being traded, and we want people to check it out at thehockeynews.com. But of course, the old cliche is if Wayne Gretzky can be traded, anyone can be traded. We know that. But I know I would be completely shocked if Quinton Byfield was part of any serious trade discussions, much less actually being traded. How do you want to address that in any way, the rumor out there about Quinton Byfield?
Yeah, I just chalk it up to it's trade season. I don't want to say clickbait because I don't want to disrespect anyone, but it's, it's speculation. Like, I could speculate about anything. You and I right now could speculate about any player, right? But at the end of the day, when you look at what the Kings have been trying to do for 3 years, it's to have center depth down the middle so they can match up and create matchup problems for other teams. So not only are in this theory, are you trading away your either 1 or 2 center, depending on how you look at it, but also probably your future first line center locked in. Like, it just seems, what are you going to get in return for Quinton Byfield that's going to push you past the Oilers this season? Because that's what the article suggested. And if you think about it for a few minutes, you realize what the article probably is. And that's all I'll leave it at that. I would be stunned beyond belief if he is traded. And I don't see any return outside of like a top 10 player that would his removal and the addition of that player catapults the Kings to some kind of stratosphere. I don't see it. So not taking it seriously.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So you did write another article though in the Hockey News. I talked about it on this show about the Kings possibly targeting Jonathan Marchessault of the Nashville Predators. I know I've talked about Alex Tuch of the Sabres. Our friend Russell Morgan from Hockey Royalty reported the Kings were interested in him. Those are, I think, realistic trade targets for the Kings to go after. You can touch on those 2 guys if there's any other names you want to throw out there as well. But it's about, people ask me a lot of times about this player, that player, and I'll say, the Kings would love to get that guy, but why would that other team want to trade him? But when you're looking at teams that are probably not in the playoff race anymore, that are right-handed shots that could potentially help your top 6, guys like that, realistic targets, it seems like Marchessault, Tuch, those kind of guys are exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, the Marchessault article I wrote, it was more like looking at the landscape. There's no actual rumor or anything like that, but what I try to do is piece together the Nashville Predators season, stuff that Barry Trotz has said about, like, if we don't pick it up soon, like, we might have to rebuild, stuff like that. And then I believe Andrew Knoll kind of mentioned or picked up on the fact that the Nashville and LA scouts were kind of playing tag with each other, scouting each other's games a little bit there. So it was more, full disclosure, it was speculative on my part too, just like Gabriel's article. But I tried to at least see like a paper trail and try to come to a conclusion. Anyway, yeah, a guy like Marchessault, my thing is, like, if you're going to make a trade, and Tuch falls into this category too, like, get a player that's going to actually make an impact, because there are players like Oliver Bjorkstrand or, right winger Ricard Raquel is another name that comes up a lot. Good players, I have nothing against those guys, but it doesn't move me. I don't know if it moves the needle. I think, it just kind of fills that hole that we were talking about, but I don't think it gives you that extra punch of like, whoa, now they're adding this guy to this group. Let's see what. So when I hear a name like Tuch or Marchessault, like, I'm like, okay, now we're kind of talking. Like, you're talking about someone who can make a direct impact. In the case of Marchessault, he's a winner. He's a clutch player. Comes up big in big games. Yeah, his contract isn't a sweetheart deal or anything, especially the term. But with the cap going up, I'm like, man, if I'm them, I eat that contract all day. Like, no problem. Yes, the last 2 years are going to be ugly, but there's one thing we've learned. You can move any contract anytime. I'm done worrying about contracts, especially a $5 million, 5.5. Like, that's not even on $100 million cap. Like, what's the percentage there? It's not going to cripple you or anything like that. Same thing with Tuch. I think he falls into the same AAV, but obviously he's younger and there's more upside with him. And he seems like to me a more Kings player, a more of a north-south. He'll put his shoulder down, go to the net, score goals like that. He's not like this high skill guy like a Marcia. So I think both of those, if I had to name them or I had to list them, they're probably 1 and 2 most attractive options for the Kings, in my opinion.
It's always great when someone I respect has the same thoughts as me. So that's very, very good. We've got some more with Karo Blikian. We're going to touch a little bit on what the Kings are going to do, hopefully down the final 27 games of the season. They play tonight against the Canucks. We'll talk about that and more here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. The NBA action is just getting started, and there is no better place for you to get in on that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off, you can bet on a fourth quarter comeback and stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. FanDuel has live betting, and it keeps the excitement of the game going regardless of when you join in. If you're just looking for a late-game rally or maybe picking a player to hit a clutch three-pointer, FanDuel is always there for you. And right now, FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, wrapping it up with Karo Blikian of the Hockey News and also the Bannerman Podcast. And just kind of before we get into kind of the Kings tonight and going forward, anyone untouchable in the organization for you when you're looking at a trade? I know that's obviously hard to speculate on what the Kings could be getting returned, but like a Liam Greentree, a Carter George, are those guys in your mind completely off the table?
Hard to answer that, because what do the Kings want to do? Do they want to win right now? Is that the priority? Doughty Kopitar, right? Like they're at the end. Is that at the forefront, or are they trying to play the in-between kind of like, yeah, let's go for it, but let's also develop, these kids. Like we want to play that game. I don't think I would say no on the goaltending. You have 3 now in Portillo, George, and Slokinski that you look at it and be like, okay, we just really need one of these guys to really, become the cream of the crop or rise to that level. So I think that's a position of strength. When I look at it, I'd be like, yeah, like that makes sense. You move one of these kids. They're not all going to play, most likely. And if they're all going to be as good as they're projected to be, only one of them can start, and the other one's going to be a backup. So, I think there's strength there to move from there. I would not trade Liam Greentree at this point unless it's a deal that knocks my socks off, just because you talk about positions of strength, like everything else is a position of weakness right now in the prospect pool. Literally everything else other than goaltending. So, it looks like you got a good one. He's lighting it up again for Windsor. So I would hesitate on Greentree quite a bit, but I think the goaltending, man, I think if there's something to be had there, I think, yeah, you whether it's George or Slokinski, or maybe not Portillo because he's closer and you might actually need him like next season, but maybe one of those two, I think you might be willing to part with.
We kind of touched on this a little bit, but Kings are wrapping up a mini 3-game homestand. They've got an important division matchup against a desperate Vancouver team tonight. Kings have the majority of their games at home. They've got games in hand on both Edmonton and Vegas. Are you feeling like a possible run at the division title? Is it? What are your chances? Do you think it's possible? Are you at least thinking maybe a shot at getting second place in home ice with the way things are going again? All the home games, games in hand, all that kind of stuff.
I think absolutely. There hasn't been a better shot, at least maybe not with March coming up in recent years, where you're like, wow, the division title is like right there for them to take. I feel pretty good about it. I feel the Oilers are sliding simultaneously, so that always helps. But I've always maintained, like, especially with Vegas, they can play with Vegas. And Vegas is a good team, but I don't think they're the team they used to be, or at least the team they were when they won the cup. So I think, I think division's possible. I think second place is certainly possible. And I'd be completely happy with them just getting home ice in the first round, because that just hasn't happened. If it's Edmonton again, like, that's one thing that hasn't happened yet. LA with home ice against Edmonton. So shooting for 1 and 2, which is very feasible. I think that's a great spot to be in.
All right, that's Karo Blikian of the Hockey News covering the LA Kings, also one of the hosts of the Bannerman podcast, thehockeynews.com and the bannermanpodcast.com. Karo, anything else you want to promote? You got anything in the works as far as something people should keep an eye out for, or anything like that?
No, just focusing on the podcast and writing as much as I can for the Hockey News. I'm really enjoying it. So we just dropped a new podcast episode today, so maybe check that out. How about that as a plug?
All right, very good. Well, we always appreciate your time, Karo. I was a little surprised I didn't see you out there when it was Armenian Heritage Night. I was expecting to maybe see you out there at Crypto, but no, you let Keith go in your place, I guess.
I did. Weekends are a little tough with the little ones, right? Like they need parent time too. So I'll make the sacrifice for the greater good of my kids. Yeah.
Spoken like a good dad. All right, Karo, appreciate it. We will see you out there, I'm sure, at Crypto, and I'm sure we'll talk again. Hopefully a little playoff hockey in the near future.
There you go.
All right. Thank you. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, we will have a recap of the Canucks-Kings game tonight. It'll probably be very late night Wednesday, but it'll be there for you Thursday morning for you to check out in case you're not a night owl, which probably most of you are not. If you want to stick around and communicate with the show in any way, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com. You can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comment section. Stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, and God help me, TikTok. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.